Yes, it's funny how much can change in a year, isn't it? I could still remember over a year ago when I had lost my faith in God, had no idea where I was heading in life, and was a struggling single mother who had just lost her father and was using and was using alcohol to self-medicate. I felt as if I had no future, nobody to look up to, and felt that every time I took a step forward, life would just take me 10 steps back. But here I am today, almost a full year sober, with an amazing fiance, graduated with a job, thank you, that I love, and speaking in a church setting. Growing up was not easy for me. I witnessed some things a child should never witness and spent my childhood trying to help my parents and raise my little sister. My mother was bipolar and a full-blown alcoholic. My father was a hard worker who did his best to raise us, but spent most of his time trying to help my mother, which led to many horrible arguments. By the time I was in the 4th grade, I had witnessed my mother's addiction get worse, which led to an affair that pretty much destroyed my father to the point where he had attempted suicide while me and my sister were both home. Luckily, my father survived, but to be honest, he was never the same afterwards. They both tried to work things out for years, but things got worse until they finally decided to call it quits. After another suicide attempt, my father was institutionalized. Afterwards, he was arrested for threats relating to my mom's affair, and my sister and I were about to be put into foster care until our wonderful neighbors legally adopted us. After his release, I was allowed to move back in with him once I turned 16. My mom was not mentally stable. She ended up on the streets. My father did the best he could with us, but he would drink and take out his anger on me. I ended up moving out as soon as I found an opportunity. I ended up moving in with my boyfriend at the time, and although he didn't treat me the greatest, I figured anything would be better than living with my angry father. Once I had moved out, my father and I got along much better, but I could tell he was still angry and hurt on the inside. I ended up in a toxic relationship for almost 10 years, but to be honest, I don't think I knew much better at the time. Although we had a beautiful son together after several years, I was being taken advantage of financially and being mentally abused once again. He was a full-blown narcissist. Finally, he had nothing left to take from me, and the relationship came to an end. He had kicked me out of what I thought of was our house, and my son and I ended up moving into a small apartment that was infested with cockroaches. So here I was with no money, forced to quit my job in a part of town that I felt like I was so far from my friends. I didn't think things could get much worse, and that's where I think my love for escaping through a bottle of wine began. I wanted to mask the loneliness and the feelings of abandonment. Eventually, we moved again, leaving the small amount of furniture we had behind due to the bug infestation. Another apartment in Hull, but it was much better. I was finally able to put my son in daycare and start the process to go back to school. Then boom, not even a month later, after my son started daycare, we got hit by the 2018 tornado outbreak, which affected Montbler and Gatineau. When it happened, my son and I were actually walking home and managed to run for cover into one of the nearby gas stations. When the wind settled down, we were able to head outside, but it was complete chaos. Outside resembled what had been going on in my head and in my dreams. It seemed as if the world was ending. And there was our apartment with the roof completely blown off and the door completely caved in with wood from a tree that must have fallen on it. I thought to myself on how crazy it was that I had literally walked out that door 10 minutes prior to the storm. And how if my timing was just a little off, we could have been seriously injured or had not survived. I should have appreciated the fact that we were still alive and okay, but instead I used this occasion to continue with my drinking and to continue playing the victim. So there we were without a home again, needing to start fresh again. I had a lot of support from my father, and luckily the Red Cross did help out, but because so many people were moving at the same time, finding an apartment I could afford was almost impossible, especially with no job or source of income. We ended up living in different hotels for about 6 months, and as fun as it sounds, it was not easy with a 4-year-old child, especially while having to transfer locations every 2 weeks. During that time, my drinking got worse. I used the tornado as an excuse to say, F it. Every time I tried to do better, something bad happened, so what's the point? Since I could not start school until I actually found a place to live, I decided this would be my time to party and forget, not realizing that alcohol did not lead to the best decisions and definitely did not bring out the best version of me. I would always compare my drinking to my mother's. thinking I was not an actual alcoholic because my actions were never as bad as hers in my head. I kept telling myself, if anything, I'm a functional alcoholic. At least I only binge when my kid is at his father's, right? Not realizing that binge drinking on the weekend did in fact affect my depression and personality for the following week. I started believing all the words my son's father used to tell me, telling myself I was not worthy, lovable, going anywhere in life, and that I was going to end up just like my parents. It's funny how if you're told things so many times, no matter how inaccurate they are, you actually start to believe them. And unfortunately, I still struggle with my confidence to this day. Eventually, my son and I finally found another apartment, and I ended up going back to school for accounting. Although things were looking a bit better for us, the drinking continued, mostly on weekends, but still had a glass of wine or two every night before bed. When COVID hit and I no longer needed to attend class in person, I drank even more, knowing that I did not have to leave the house the next day. Because I was still succeeding in school and managing being a mom, I was still in denial with my addiction to escape. Alcohol basically became my best friend. Between the lockdowns, the financial struggles, the stress of school, and the feelings of loneliness, I fell into a huge depression. The alcohol definitely was not helping, but at the time, I had no other coping skills. I was not in the right state of mind, and it got to the point where I really wanted to give up. I actually had set a date. I was at the point where I could barely get out of bed unless I had to pick my son up from school, and was present physically but not mentally. Unfortunately, I was so caught up in my own depression and selfishness, I did not realize my father was also falling into a deep depression and struggling again. I lost my father to suicide on March 30th, 2021, the day after my son's 7th birthday. He finally succeeded at what he tried years ago. And I felt so much guilt. In one way, it was a major wake-up call as to how much suicide actually affects those around you. And holding on to anger and resentment for so long can literally eat you out from the inside. In another way, I use this as an excuse to drink even more because I was not able to handle the pain. You truly think everyone is better off without you, but in reality, so many people end up wishing you were still here and realizing there's no way, I realized there was no other way I could put my son through the pain I was in. One of the last things my father told me was not to give up no matter what and to not dwell on the past. So even though every ounce of my body wanted to quit, I kept going. I graduated my accounting program with the support of my amazing teachers. I was still drinking, but I know it was no longer bringing me any comfort. The hangovers started lasting longer, the shakes got worse, and it was not good for my emotional state. Deep down, I knew I couldn't live like this anymore, especially if I wanted to keep a job. Although I had cut down, I didn't have it in me to quit drinking completely. I decided I would start dating again and told myself I was tired of being lonely. And then I met Blake. And it's funny because my first thought was, well, I can't date someone that doesn't drink. What if he judges me? I could never completely stop. And for some reason, we just clicked. I was still drinking on weekends, but he did not make me feel judged once and never asked me to stop. He literally saw me at my worst. I ended up attending an Ashes to Rubies event because he was going to perform. And although I had planned on drinking afterwards, I felt as if some of the stories really touched me and it inspired me to take a break. I decided I was not going to drink for a few weeks, which did seem like a lifetime for me at the time. After that few weeks, I noticed a difference in myself. My depression and anxiety was not affecting me the way it had been previously, and I was sleeping a lot better. The withdrawals had stopped, and I just decided to keep going without promising myself or anyone anything. I will be 1 year sober February 21st. And it honestly feels amazing. If I had continued drinking, I would have most likely not excelled at my job, and I would have most likely pushed away a great person. I'm not going to lie, it was not always easy. I had to find other ways to cope with my moments of sadness and actually deal with the trauma that had been haunting me for so long. But I truly believe that God brings certain people in your life for a reason. Just when I thought I no longer believed in God, he found a way to show me that happiness and love are still possible for me if I believe and accept it into my life. I just hope my story can inspire someone just like the stories I heard here inspired me. And for anyone truly struggling, I just want you to know that even though it's even though it seems so far away, sometimes there's truly a light at the end of the tunnel. Please don't give up, and don't be afraid to seek out help when you need it. There's so many resources out there, and I wish I would have known about them sooner. Yeah.